I have to put on my Mars face for this one. This is the video about Mars. Some of you guys have sick Marses. I hate you. I wish I had an awesome Mars. So, I was just talking with my friend about this the other day, and I'm thinking, so, just recapping, Mars is the lesser malefic, along with Saturn, who's the greater malefic. These two assholes will probably cause you more trouble than anyone else. And just, if you have a well-dignified Saturn and a well-dignified Mars, you're probably already miles ahead of pretty much anyone else, because they're just going to be like, well, we'll just help you do whatever you want. Because they're evil. Well, they're not evil. Yeah, they're evil. But some people will say, they're harsh energies that must be harnessed properly. No, they'll say, harsh but necessary energies. They're evil. Alright, they cause misery. They cause your limbs to be chopped off. They cause your balls to get, like, strangled up. Not fun. They give you, old sickness feelings and isolation and death and bleeding and infections. Do you want those? No, those are good things. They're not. Anyway, the reason why I say that you'd be miles ahead is because if you have a good, dignified Saturn and a Mars, they're probably going to leave you alone. Or you're going to be the asshole that causes misery for anyone else. Or they're just going to leave you, like I said, they're just going to leave you alone. Just stuff to keep in mind as we go through the superior planets. By the way, now that we are past the Sun, because the last video was Venus, but typically the Chaldean order goes Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Sun's in the middle, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. Moon's at the bottom. Not saying she's the worst or anything, it's just she's the closest to our sphere of mortality. Saturn's the farthest. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are the superior planets because they take longer to go around the Sun, around the, around the solar system. No, they take longer to go around the solar system, or whatever. But anyway, the reason why I mention that is because now it's going to get into, these are bigger, more abstract concepts. So, and you might be confused about that, but this is how I see it. Moon is closest, so she deals with the common people. That's emotions. Mercury rules the mind. Venus rules, I don't know what Venus rules after that. The Sun, like a king surveying the surrounding kingdom, he's in the center. He gets to see everything. Mars is that shithead right outside the Sun. He causes a lot of trouble, even if he is the lesser malefic. That's why I say if you have a good Mars and a good Saturn, they'll probably leave you alone. Seriously. Anciently, Mars is called, this is how his name was Mars. Originally his name was, I'm not going to pronounce this right. Some pompous person can probably help. I'm someone who's much more learned than I am. Mavors, or Mavors. M-A-V-O-R-S. Eventually someone just, I guess it just got abbreviated to Mars. Or Aries, another ancient name. Mars rules Aries by day and Scorpio by night. He rules both of them, but those are his day houses, or his day signs and his night signs. His signs of detriment are Libra and Taurus, because they are exactly opposite his signs. He is exalted in Capricorn, and he falls in Cancer. Interestingly enough, though, he gets his triplicity in the water signs. So, in Cancer, he is fallen, but he is also in his triplicity. It doesn't make it much better. In fact, it's pretty bad. He rules the triplicity of water, just all of the water signs. If you think about it, Mars could be an example of like a hot blade being forged. You stick it in water and it tempers it. That's what you do. You just stuff him in some water and he like kind of cools down because he's excessively hot. It's not really what you do, but that's what I think of it as, and it helps me as you try and learn these abstract concepts. Terms and all this other stuff I'm not going to go over because I really don't find any need to do that right now. His nature: masculine, nocturnal, hot and dry, and choleric. Choleric being one of the 4 temperaments, along with sanguine, melancholy, and phlegm. Choleric's like he's like that short Irish guy that always wants to fight everyone. You want to fight about it? Well, yeah, he just beats the shit out of them. I mean, So the reason why he's nocturnal is because I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but if you put Mars in the day, he's gonna just wreak havoc. Why? Oh, I really shouldn't do this. It's complicated. Basically, if you stick Mars in the night, like below the horizon, he's a little bit happier because he's a bit more tempered. He's not as Super Saiyan-y, you know what I mean? I mean, arguably, if you want to have Mars go Super Saiyan, I guess you could, but he's just gonna destroy everything. That's the idea. I know that's a little rambly, but just bear with me. The idea with Mars is, I want to cover this a little bit more because now we're getting into, like, I think that it's a little bit harder to grasp. So, Mars and Saturn are the malefics. Why? Mars traditionally was seen as a hot, excessively super hot planet. He burns things. You might ask, well, why doesn't the sun burn things? I mean, he is the sun. Well, because the sun, as we covered, is hot and dry temperately, just as Venus is temperately cold and wet. I know that doesn't make sense. I would have to read up a little bit more because Mars doesn't even give off heat, does he? Well, I know it sounds a little confusing, but this is just how you learn it. Mars is hot and dry, excessively so. And what that means is Mars's nature is to separate violently. Like think of a raider with a big cleaver coming to chop your arm off. Oh, well, that's not a really pleasant way to cut my arm off. It's different than Mercury. While Mercury separates and analyzes, think of it as someone delicately taking apart a computer. You get to look at all the pieces and you get to see what works and how things work. That's how Mercury does. Separation and analysis. Venus is unity. Venus wants intimacy and sex. That's what Venus does. Mars, that's what Mars is. That's what he does. And if you have a bad Mars, it's trouble. Just as if you have a bad Saturn, it's trouble. Because they're more excessive. It would be like, this is a nice, well-balanced meal of greens and fish and a potato, compared to, yes, this is a nice, well-balanced meal of pure hot sauce that I'm going to put in my eyes now. It's excessive. And it's hot. I mean, surely no one can survive off of that diet, but I'm sure Mars probably could if he was a human. He's like the fighter. He's like the warlord, pretty much. He wants to fight. He represents victory, invincibility, combat, arguments, fighting. Some diseases, a lot of infections. He rejoices in the 6th house. I can't remember why, but he does. He also represents surgeons. So if somehow you're a surgeon and you're watching this, cool. I always thought it would be cool to, have Mars conjunct the ascendant in Scorpio. I would be a surgeon. I would absolutely be a surgeon. But I'm not. I have clumsy hands and I'm not really that brilliant with medicine. So, whatever. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I want you to know, keep an eye out for Mars and Saturn. Those are the bad guys in this. Jupiter and Venus are the good guys. And to an extent, the moon and the sun. But for those two, it depends on where they are. They can be good or bad. For example, the sun can be a bad guy if you have your planets close to him, like within 15 degrees on either side. He's just going to burn them to a crisp. That's a condition called under the sun's beams. Like, makes it so you can't see them. They're just like, and they're burned by his light and his heat, literally. This is how it works. Also, just as another example, combust. So the sun, I know this is supposed to be for Mars, but just as a heads up, if stuff is on either side of the sun, 8 degrees, it's combust. It's even worse than under the sun's beams. Anyway, that's the reason how the sun can be bad. If you make trines or sextiles to the suns, it's good. It can be good or bad. But Mars pretty much is almost always bad because of his excessive heat. So, and just as an example, he rules Aries and Scorpio. Aries is the fire sign, Scorpio is the water sign. I think Mars does a little bit better in Scorpio because it's not a fire sign. It doesn't heat him up as much. Again, work with it. This is how this stuff works. If you put Mars in Scorpio, not only is he in rulership, but he is in triplicity, as we mentioned. He rules the water triplicities. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and again, this is bare bones stuff. But just keep it in mind, if you have a good Mars, I would use it really, really strongly, as long as he's like with you and not against you. And we'll probably go over the teams that are with and against you later. But as a rule, I would say a good Mars that is on your side is not something you should squander. Don't be an asshole to him. He's seriously really good if you get a good one. People signified. Princes ruling by tyranny or oppression. Tyrants, usurpers, new conquerors. Generals of armies, colonels, captains or soldiers, apothecaries, physicians, surgeons, gunners, butchers, smiths, bakers, watchmakers. I would argue that watchmakers are more of a Saturn thing because Saturn rules clocks, but watchmakers need that focus just as a surgeon does, so I can see where this is coming from. So you get the idea. Aggressive, hyper, super masculine, aggressive people that want to rule everything, and whether you like it or not. That's Mars. Anatomy and illnesses. The gall, the left eel, tertian fevers, pestilent burning fevers, migraines, carbuncles, the plague and all plague sores, burnings, ringworm, blisters, frenzies, mad, sudden distempers in the head, yellow jaundice, all wounds and diseases in men's genitals. Mm-hmm. The stone, both in the reins and bladder. So I think kidney stones. Scars or smallpox in the face, all hurts by iron. So again, if you get cut by a blade, that's Mars. The shingles and such other diseases as arise by abundance of too much choler, anger, or passion. Again, excessively hot. It's amazing how this stuff kind of fits in together. I almost don't do it justice by talking about it. Colors and savors. Red, red, red. It says yellow. I mean, you can do yellow, but I think yellow is more of the sun because it's a happy color. Fiery and shining colors. Savors that are bitter, sharp, and burn the tongue. Pepper. Also garlic. Herbs and plants and trees. Again, this is the fun stuff. Things that are red in color, whose leaves are pointed and sharp, whose taste is caustic and burning, that love to grow in dry places, and are corrosive and penetrate the flesh and bones with a subtle heat. They are as follows: the nettle, all manner of thistles, rest harrow or cammock, devil's milk or petty spurge. I do not know what half these are. White and red brambles, the white vulgarly called by the herbalists ram, I don't know what that is, lingwort, onion. Now I know we mentioned that the onion is also under the moon, but I think that it makes more sense to be under Mars too. I'm just reading what it says. Garlic, mustard seed. Mustard gas, a weapon of war. Interesting and convenient how that works. Pepper, ginger, leeks, ditander, hemlock. I think hemlock is actually ruled by Saturn. So some of these sources, they kind of overlap, and I mean, there's no, this is what it is. People spent their entire lives figuring this stuff out, so obviously some of it's going to cross. In Culpeper's book, The Complete Herbal, he specifically says hemlock is ruled by Saturn. So I go with Culpeper because he's awesome, and he's done this stuff his entire life. Also a bunch of other, tamarinds. If you're Indian, I assume that tamarinds will be, they all make sense. So that's kind of the stuff that he does. Those are things that he rules. Just as a little example, as I said, garlic is a big one. All trees that are prickly, such as the thorn or chestnut. Interestingly enough, if you've ever looked at a rose, roses have wonderful, wonderful smells and they look great, but they also have thorns. Culpeper has more on that. I mean, he's like my source for all the herb stuff. But generally, thorns can be seen as little tiny plant weapons. It's really interesting how it works out that way. Seriously, it is. Places that Mars rules, or that he would signify. Smiths, shops, furnaces, slaughterhouses, places where bricks or charcoal is burnt, chimneys and forges. Minerals and stones. Iron. Arsenic, brimstone, ochre, adamant, lodestone, bloodstone, jasper, the many-colored amethyst. I think amethysts are typically ruled by Jupiter. The touchstone. Don't know what touchstone is other than the director's thing. Red lead or vermilion. And just as a rule, it's pretty interesting. If you get into magic far enough, you'll learn that a lot of spirits don't like iron. I haven't read why, or I don't understand why. I guess it just disrupts some stuff with the spirits. I think that's cool because some people, if you're going to make a Mars talisman out of metal, I can't remember what metal they suggest, but it's not iron because it just doesn't, for some reason or another, it doesn't work with the spirits. I can't explain why, but it doesn't right now. So if you're interested, you feel free to ask me, direct message me or whatever. I'll try and find an answer for you. Typically, as a rule, before I get into his physical descriptions and well-dignified and ill-dignified, Mars is the big dick fighter that's literally just going to kill you. That's what it is. Or he's the guy that just charges into the fray. Some people will probably think that, oh, well, if he's Scorpio, he's the person who's ruling the army. Stop it! It doesn't work that way. If you have Scorpio with Mars in it, that's really good. Typically, it makes him, like, I want to say similar to Aries, but, like, I can't generalize this stuff because it's so different. There's so many degrees, so many different facets. But I would say that it's probably, like I said, better in Scorpio because it's a water sign, and he's in triplicity in water signs, and he's in rulership in Scorpio, and if you get up within the first 7 degrees in Scorpio, he's also in term. So if you have that, congrats. You're probably really, really good at whatever it might indicate. Or you might find people in your life that might be like that, or some such thing. Also, I believe Mars rules siblings no matter where he is in the chart. I'm sure I'm wrong about that because that might not always be so, but he does rule siblings in the chart. Just as Mercury rules younger siblings, and Saturn rules older siblings as well. So they can represent a whole bunch of different stuff depending on where they are. This is why I keep saying to people, don't use the 10 planets. 7 planets is already more than enough. Trust me. Let's go on to the physical descriptions. Generally middle stature, strong bodies, big bones, more lean than fat. Complexion of a brown, ruddy color or of a high color. Their visage round, their hair red or sandy and flaxen, and many times crisping or curling. Sharp hazel eyes, and they are piercing. A bold, confident countenance, and the man active and fearless. When Mars is oriental, he signifies valiant men, some white mixed with the redness, a decent tallness of body, hairy of his body. Occidental, very ruddy complexion, but mean in stature. Little head, a smooth body, and not hairy. Yellow hair, stiff, the natural humors generally more dry. Just as a quick thing, Oriental is if the planet would hypothetically rise before the sun, and Occidental would be they would hypothetically rise after the sun. Just see where they're going. It's tricky. I want to get into that. But like I said, you don't really have to know it. That's why I'm not really talking about it right now. Manners when well dignified for Mars. In feats of war and courage, invincible, scorning any should exceed him, subject to no reason, bold and confident, immovable, contentious, challenging all honor to themselves, valiant, lovers of war and things pertaining thereunto, hazarding himself to all perils, willingly will obey nobody, nor submit to any. A large reporter of his own acts, one that fights all things in comparison of victory, and yet prudent behavior in his own affairs. So pretty much Genghis Khan might be a good idea of what Mars could be. Manners when badly placed. Then he is a prattler without modesty or honesty, a lover of slaughter and quarrels, murder, thievery, a promoter of sedition, frays and commotion, and highway thief, as wavering as the wind, a traitor, of turbulent spirit, perjurer, obscene, rash, inhumane, neither fearing God or caring for man, unthankful, treacherous, oppressors, ravenous, cheater, furious, and violent. Again, If you have a shitty Mars like I do, doesn't mean that you're like that. It just, I mean, that's stuff that he could signify. It could mean that it's you, or it could be your brother, or one of your 5 brothers, or your uncle, or whatever. Depends where they are in the houses. I strongly suggest you go back and you look at what the houses represent. I know I need to make videos about each individual house, but I really want to get into some of the more fun stuff. I tell you these things because it's important to know the basics. Without the basics, you are not going to be able to get any farther than where you are now. With that being said, I thought this was going to be a more interesting video, but I guess it's not. That's fine. Key takeaways: Mars is malefic and he's bad. And he symbolizes violent separation, and try not to piss him off. Anyway, that's it. We'll get on with Jupiter next time, guys.